credentials from the dark web. It's not uncommon for millions of records to be taken in a single breach. The attacker then uses a botnet to check masses of credentials against multiple accounts. A botnet refers to a group of devices which has been infected by malware and have come under the control of a malicious actor. These bots hammer websites with various combinations of user IDs and passwords over and over until they hit the right combination and get in. Lastly, upon the successful login, the attacker can take over these accounts and steal personal information or execute activities as that user. Hackers will not restrict themselves to government systems. They will try these same credentials across banking, e-commerce, and even social media systems to try to gain access. For the GC Key service, which is used by approximately 30 federal departments and allows Canadians to access services like Employment and Social Development Canada's My Service Canada account, by using previously hacked usernames and passwords, the bad actors were able to fraudulently acquire approximately 9,000 of the roughly 12 million active GC accounts, a third of which were access such services and are being further examined for suspicious activities. The GC has worked around the clock to reduce the threat to Canadians. Affected GC Key accounts were cancelled as soon as the threat was discovered, and departments are contacting users whose credentials were compromised to provide instructions on how to receive a new GC Key. After putting various security mitigation measures in place, the credential stuffing attack on GC Key has ceased. I'd like to recognize the work of Shared Services Canada, the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, the cyber team at TBS, and all of the departments who worked on identifying and mitigating these attacks. Because of their work and because of the systems that we have in place, we were able to detect these attacks early on and have largely been able to mitigate the impact of Canadians, with the goal of restoring their full access to government systems as soon as possible. It's important to note that the GC Key service itself was not compromised, and there is no indication of compromise from our internal government services. The government continues to remain vigilant and continues to closely monitor the GC Key service to ensure that any further threats are mitigated as soon as they are discovered. L'incident qui a touché le service de clé GC a été rapporté à la GRC pour être enquêté. Le gouvernement prend aussi la protection de la vie privée très sérieuse. Par conséquent, bien que les noms d'utilisateurs et les mots de passe ne contenaient pas de renseignements personnels en soi, le gouvernement a informé le commissariat à la protection de la vie privée et travaillera étroitement avec lui pour appuyer les ministres touchés par cette attaque. Similarly, CRA's Credential system, which is separate from GC Key, was also impacted by these credential stuffing attacks. The bad actors were able to use the previously hacked credentials to access the CRA portal. They were also able to exploit a vulnerability in the configuration of security software solutions, which allowed them to bypass the CRA's security questions and gain access to a user's CRA account. This vulnerability was patched, and the risk of this attack vector has been mitigated. Early on Saturday morning, the CRA portal was directly targeted with a large amount of traffic using a botnet to attempt to attack the services through credential stuffing. Out of an abundance of caution, the CRA portal was shut down to contain the attack and implement measures to protect CRA services. Environ 3300 comptes de l'agence ont été visés dans le cadre de cette attaque contre le service, les services clés GC, et environ 2200 autres comptes de l'agence ont fait l'objet d'une attaque de bourrage de justification directement. L'accès aux comptes touchés a été suspendu afin de préserver la sécurité des renseignements des contribuables. L'agence contacte tous les détenteurs de comptes touchés et elle travaillera avec eux pour établir leur accès au service, mon dossier de l'agence. Ma collègue Annette fournira plus de détails à ce sujet. The GC takes security and privacy very seriously. The government continues to monitor the situation to ensure that prompt mitigation responses are applied as soon as the threat is detected. Afin de réduire les risques d'être touchés par ce type de cyberattaque, il est très important que tous les Canadiens et Canadiennes restent vigilants. La meilleure façon de se protéger, c'est de toujours utiliser un mot de passe unique pour chaque compte en ligne, chaque site web et chaque système. Nous reconnaissons qu'il peut être difficile à gérer tous ces mots de passe. Nous encourageons les gens d'utiliser des outils qui permettent de créer, stocker et se souvenir des mots de passe en général. Nous encourageons aussi fortement tous ceux dont les comptes ont été visés d'examiner les renseignements personnels détenus par les comptes, par les autres comptes pour s'assurer qu'ils n'ont pas été modifiés ou de mettre à jour leur mot de passe. Si vous voyez quelque chose qui semble hors de l'ordinaire, communiquez avec les fournisseurs de services en question et alertez-le que votre compte a possiblement été compromis. I'll say it again. If your account has been affected, we strongly encourage you to review your personal information on other accounts such as banking, e-commerce, and social media to make sure nothing has been changed. And then update your passwords. If you see anything that looks out of the ordinary, contact the service providers and let them know your account may have been compromised. The Government of Canada takes security and privacy very seriously. We will continue to monitor the situation to ensure that all possible threat mitigation responses are applied. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Annette Butekoffer, and I am the Assistant Commissioner of the Information Technology Branch and Chief Information Officer at the Canada Revenue Agency. I am accompanied by my colleagues from the CRA, Maxime Guenette, Assistant Commissioner of the Public Affairs Branch and Chief Privacy Officer, and Jillian Pranke, Deputy Assistant Commissioner, Assessment, Benefit and Service Branch. I can confirm that the Canada Revenue Agency was impacted by 3 cybersecurity incidents that may have allowed fraudsters to access the CRA My Account of certain individuals. In total, approximately 5,600 accounts out of about 15 million may have been impacted by these security incidents. The first incident involved approximately 3,400 CRA accounts from the GC Key incident. The second incident involved an attempt to access taxpayer accounts directly through CRA services involving over 2,000 taxpayer accounts. This was detected last week and immediately shut down. As Mark mentioned, the bad actors were able to exploit a vulnerability in the configuration of security software, which allowed them to bypass the CRA security questions and gain access to a user's CRA account. The third incident occurred over the weekend. As a result of this incident, the CRA chose to take the precautionary measures of temporarily suspending online services. It is important to know that in all cases, the usernames and passwords that were used were acquired by fraudsters in previous third-party data breaches. Il est important de mentionner que dans chaque cas,
les noms de utilisateurs et les mots de passe utilisés ont été obtenus par les fraudeurs lors du piratage de données précédents liés à la protection des données par un tiers. The CRA is continuing to analyze this
incident. Law enforcement assistance has been requested from the RCMP and an investigation has been initiated. Il va de soi que l'Agence de revenu du Canada
continue d'analyser les deux incidents avec ses partenaires gouvernementaux. Je m'excuse, les 3 incidents avec ses partenaires gouvernementaux. L'aide de la GRC a été demandée et une enquête est en cours.
And an investigation is underway.
The CRA takes the protection of taxpayers' information very seriously. The confidence and trust that individuals and businesses have in the CRA are the cornerstones of Canada's tax system. Our teams have been working around the clock to resolve these issues and protect the confidential information of Canadians. Several immediate measures have been put in place. First and foremost, the accounts of impacted individuals have been revoked, and each person will receive a letter from the CRA explaining how to confirm their identity in order to protect and restore access to their CRA account. To prevent access to other government online accounts, the link between my CRA My Account and My Service Canada account has temporarily been disabled. And as previously mentioned, as an additional precaution, the CRA has temporarily disabled online services. Our online and interactive voice response options for individual taxpayers currently remain offline. However, we are targeting a reactivation of those services by midweek. We now have My Business account back online with additional security measures. Employers can confidently apply for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Period 5 as planned. We know employers are counting on these funds. To prevent these kinds of cyber attacks, Canadians are strongly encouraged to avoid reusing passwords for different systems and applications. The CRA highly encourages taxpayers to use unique passwords for their CRA and banking accounts. Pour réduire le risque d'être touché par ce type de
To reduce the
cyberattaque,
risk of being
l'agence
hit with
encourage
such
fortement
cyberattacks,
les
the agency
Canadiens
strongly
à
encourages
éviter
Canadians to
d'utiliser le même mot de
avoid
passe dans
reusing the
d'autres
same
systèmes
password
et
on
applications.
various systems and
L'agence
applications.
exhorte également les
The
contribuables
agency
à
also
utiliser
strongly
des mots de
encourages
passe
taxpayers
uniques
to
pour
use
le compte
unique
bancaire
passwords
et le compte de
for their banking
l'agence.
accounts and their CRA accounts.
Additionally, once the portals are reactivated, we strongly recommend that all CRA My Account users enable email notifications as an additional measure of security. This service notifies taxpayers by email if their address or direct deposit information has been changed on CRA records. These notifications act as an early warning to Canadians of potential fraudulent activity on their account. Canadians who receive these alerts but have not authorized any changes should contact the CRA immediately. The CRA also encourages individuals who know they have been affected to call us as soon as possible at 1-800-959-8281 to discuss the new security measures that have been put in place. However, we ask that individuals not contact us simply to ask if they have been affected, as this can cause additional wait times for Canadians who urgently need to reach us. De plus, nous encourageons les gens qui savent avoir été touchés par cet incident à appeler
who know
la
that they've been
ligne
affected by this incident to call us at 1-800-959-8281
afin de discuter des
in order to
mesures qui
discuss
sont mises en place pour assurer
measures
la
that have been
sécurité de leur
implemented
compte
to
et
ensure
ce, le plus
to
rapidement
protect their
possible.
accounts as quickly as
Toutefois,
possible.
nous
However,
demandons aux
we
personnes
do
de ne
ask
pas nous
Canadians
contacter
not to
simplement
contact
pour
the agency,
demander si
simply to
elles ont
ask
été
whether or
touchées
not
par
they
cet
were
incident,
affected by this
car
incident,
cela peut entraîner des temps d'attente
as that could lead to
supplémentaires pour les
increased wait
Canadiens
times
qui ont un
for
besoin
those
urgent de
Canadians
nous
who
joindre.
have an urgent, who
The
urgently
CRA
need to reach
also
us.
offers an optional additional security measure which will allow taxpayers to set a unique personal identification number or PIN for their account in order to identify themselves quickly and securely when calling the CRA. And finally, the CRA reminds all Canadians to monitor their My Account for any unsolicited changes or suspicious activity. Et finalement, l'agence rappelle à tous les Canadiens de
Finally, the
surveiller
agency
leur
reminds
compte de
all
mon dossier
Canadians to
pour tout
monitor
changement
their
non
My
sollicité
Account
ou
and
toute activité
GCK in order
suspecte.
to detect
While our
any
online services are not
unsolicited
available,
activity or
Canadians
suspicious
can still
activity.
apply for benefits like the Canada Emergency Student Benefit or the Canada Emergency Response Benefit with the help of one of our agents by calling 1-800-959-8281. Canadians can apply for these benefits retroactively, and the CRA will continue to accept applications for either benefit in September. Bien que nos services en ligne ne soient pas disponibles,
Although our online services are not currently available, Canadians
leur demande à la prestation
can still
canadienne
apply
d'urgence pour
for
les
the
étudiants ou à la prestation
CESB
canadienne
or
d'urgence avec l'aide de
CERB
l'un de nos
through
agents
our,
en
one of
composant
our
le
agents by
1-800-959-8281. As my colleagues have mentioned, the Government of Canada, like every other government and private sector organization in the world, faces ongoing and persistent cyber threats such as these. However, the CRA has systems and tools in place to detect and monitor and investigate potential threats, in addition to having put in place measures to mitigate threats when they occur. Thank you. Merci.
Good morning. I'm Scott Jones, head of the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, which is part of the Communications Security Establishment. Le Centre pour la cybersécurité est l'autorité du gouvernement du Canada en matière de cybersécurité et constitue une source unifiée de conseils et d'avis d'experts, de services et de soutien visant les enjeux opérationnels liés à ce domaine. Nous travaillons en collaboration avec nos partenaires du gouvernement du Canada et les responsables de la sécurité de chaque ministère pour protéger l'information et les infrastructures les plus sensibles du Canada. Nous ne faisons généralement pas de commentaires sur des incidents de cybersécurité en particulier et nous ne confirmons pas les détails.
And we do not confirm
we issued
details.
a statement over the weekend confirming that we are working with our partners at the Treasury Board, Secretariat of Canada's CIO, Shared Services Canada, and other departments on the Credential stuffing attack. The credentials used in the attack came from previous non-Government of Canada data breaches. They were effective because Canadians reused old passwords on Government of Canada systems. My colleagues have already mentioned this, but it is important enough that I'm saying it again. The accounts that use unique, strong passwords remain secure. We continue to work with our partners to ensure that the government has robust systems and tools in place to monitor, detect, and investigate potential threats and to neutralize threats when they occur. The Cyber Centre strongly recommends that any Canadians affected by this incident or in any other instance where their usernames and passwords have been compromised update their passwords immediately. Do not reuse them, especially when those credentials are protecting personal, financial, or otherwise sensitive information. This will help ensure that other accounts outside of the Government of Canada are not vulnerable to the same kind of credential stuffing attack. In particular, Canadians can protect themselves from a wide range of cyber threats by taking a few key actions. First, accept updates to your software and devices. These updates often include important security patches. Second, practice good password etiquette. Use strong and unique passphrases or passwords. Third, use multi-factor authentication whenever this option is available. Fourth, be on guard for phishing and spear phishing messages. And fifth, store your data securely and make sure you know where your backups are. We've often said that cybersecurity requires a team, and with these 5 steps, all Canadians can be part of Team Cyber. And these 5 steps can help Canadians significantly offset the risks of their information being compromised by any threat actor on any site. If you need help with any of these steps, please visit the Cyber Centre's website or our Get Cyber Safe website at getcybersafe.gc.ca. Finally, since the investigation into this incident is ongoing, CSE and the Cyber Centre can't comment further on the perpetrator. Canadians should be reassured that CSE and its Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity continue to work to keep Canada and Canadians safe. And again, Canadians can stay informed by visiting getcybersafe.gc.ca or cyber.gc.ca for more information on how to stay cyber secure. Thank you.
So we'll now open the line to questions. Please identify yourself and include the media outlet you are representing. We'll be taking your questions in both official languages. We ask that you limit yourself to one question and only one follow-up, and if we have time, we'll come back for a second round if needed. Veuillez vous nommer ou nous dire quel média vous représentez.
Et nous vous demandons de vous limiter à une question et une question de suivi seulement. On pourra revenir par après s'il y a d'autres questions et il reste du temps. Vous pouvez poser vos questions dans l'une des 2 langues officielles. Alors, je me tourne vers la modératrice. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions au téléphone?
I would first ask the telephone operator whether there are questions on the phone.
Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. Veuillez s'il vous plaît appuyer sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. La première question est de Émilie Bergeron de l'agence QMI. À vous la parole.
Oui, bonjour. J'aimerais savoir, vous avez mentionné que les Canadiens qui perçoivent la PCU et la PCUE vont pouvoir continuer de la percevoir. Est-ce qu'il peut y avoir des interruptions ou des délais supplémentaires? Si j'ai bien compris, c'est seulement au téléphone que ces personnes-là peuvent continuer de faire leur demande. C'est bien cela?
Merci, c'est Annette. Oui, c'est possible de faire une application au bénéfice de CERB et de CASB avec un agent de téléphone. Maintenant, nos services mon compte ne sont pas disponibles, mais j'espère que le service va être disponible presque mercredi ou demain.
By Wednesday or possibly tomorrow.
OK, je suis pas sûre de comprendre. Donc, Vous voulez dire pour le retour des services en ligne, ça serait mercredi et jeudi. Et ma question, c'était est-ce qu'il va y avoir un délai dans... Est-ce que les gens vont attendre plus longtemps avant de recevoir leur prestation?
Le délai pour faire une application, c'est seulement 1 ou 2 jours si une personne fait une application aujourd'hui. Mais si une personne a fait une application avant, il n'y avait pas un délai.
There should be no delay.
Yes, Merci. We're working right now to restore the My Account and Represent a Client service at the present time. We are expecting that these services will be up by midweek, Wednesday. Thank you.
Okay, on peut y aller avec la prochaine question.
Operator, please go ahead with the next question.
Question from the Canadian Press. Please go ahead. Avez la parole.
Yes, good morning. You mentioned that the RCMP had been called in to investigate. Can you tell us exactly when the RCMP was notified and when they began investigating?
From a CRA point of view, we engaged the RCMP on Tuesday, August the 11th, and we have been working closely with them since that time.
Now, Canadians did not learn about this until much later. Why were Canadians not notified sooner about this, given that the RCMP was called in on Tuesday? And just as a secondary point to that, you seem to be suggesting Canadians are at fault for all of this because they didn't follow proper password protocol. But is CRA or any other element of the government revisiting its security measures given what has happened?
It's Mark Briard here. So we're constantly evaluating our security posture and addressing issues, adding mitigations. This is an ongoing challenge. The very important thing to recognize in this particular case is this is not an attack where a hacker is trying to go through the back door. They are going into the system just like normal users. They are applying credentials just like normal users. So it's very hard to detect that pattern from all of the good traffic. So it is a challenge when we look at them, but we have systems to monitor and look for these behaviors and identify when patterns don't seem to make sense, and that's how this particular vulnerability, or this particular attack, I should say, was identified. And then once it was identified, we have put mitigations in place to start to address it and prevent it in the future. The challenge we have is we have to allow regular users to be able to log into the system, so this is a normal function that has to continue. So identifying the good from the bad is one of the ongoing challenges that we're working on.
Merci. Prochaine question. Next question.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from Howard Spellman from IT World Canada. Go ahead.
Hi, I've got a question, I think, for Mark. I'd like to know why a long time ago the government hasn't mandated two-factor authentication for all customer logins. Two-factor authentication would have blocked, I believe, credential stuffing attacks.
Some two-factor authentication systems would have prevented this, especially those where you're required to have a key or a device. But that is something that is challenging. Not everyone can have those things. We also have to worry about making our systems accessible and easy to use. So it is a balancing act. We are looking at different technologies. As Scott mentioned, where multi-factor is available, we are encouraging it, and we're looking at ways of strengthening our systems to be able to address these issues. One of the ways that the CRA had implemented was exactly what we talked about, the security question. We have other things in place as well. So we're continuing to evaluate that posture and addressing it as we go.
What was the? You said there was a software misconfiguration. What was that?
So I can't get into the specifics because I don't want to divulge the security configuration of our systems. But there was a vulnerability that was exploited. It was discovered and it was patched, and it no longer is a vulnerability on our systems.
Thank you. We'll take one more question on the line, and then we'll come to the room for questions here. Moderator?
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question est de Jacques-Audrey Charbonneau de Radio-Canada. À vous la parole.
Oui, bonjour. Peut-être une autre question pour M. Brouillard. Si vous pouvez aussi expliquer en français, là, puisque les autres réponses n'ont pas été faites en français. Je me pose la question, vous dites que les attaques sont survenues, les données qui ont été utilisées par les pirates provenaient des attaques précédentes. Est-ce qu'on a une idée du lien des autres attaques précédentes? Je pense qu'il y a beaucoup de gens qui se posent la question par rapport au flux de données chez Desjardins, chez Capital One, chez toutes sortes d'autres institutions bancaires. Est-ce qu'on a une idée s'il y a un potentiel lien?
Alors, c'est possible qu'il y ait un lien, mais on ne veut pas deviner à ce moment-ci. Mais aussi, l'autre chose que je peux dire, que c'est souvent dans ces attaques-là où que les informations sont revendues sur le dark web, c'est une accumulation de plusieurs. Alors, il sera possible qu'on ne sera jamais capable de préciser exactement la source. Mais c'est quelque chose qui fait partie de l'investigation de la GRC.
Okay. Puis, justement, juste pour revenir sur le fait, tout à l'heure en anglais, on a mentionné que la GRC a été informée le 11 août dernier. Comment se fait-il qu'on ait attendu et qu'on ait attendu qu'il y ait une troisième attaque qui survienne en fin de semaine pour informer les Canadiens?
Alors, je dirais que priorité numéro 1, c'était de protéger les Canadiens, alors de déactiver les comptes. Priorité 2, c'était de contacter la GRC, de commencer les investigations, de commencer à regarder ce qui se passe. Priorité 3, mettre en place les mitigations dont je parlais. Et évidemment, il fallait avoir un processus de notification et de renouvellement des comptes chez les utilisateurs. Alors, il y avait des discussions à faire, de la préparation, et ça a pris quelques jours pour effectuer ça. Mais ce qui était le plus important, vraiment, c'était une fois que l'accès était découvert, que ces comptes-là étaient bloqués. Alors, c'était vraiment ça la priorité.
Merci. On va prendre des questions dans la salle. We'll start on the far side.
Bonjour, Lina Dib, la presse canadienne. Peut-être continuer sur cette question-là. Vous l'avez su mardi, mais le système n'était plus disponible en ligne seulement en fin de semaine. Est-ce que c'est parce que c'était différent? Je comprends que vous avez désactivé les comptes touchés, mais pourquoi est-ce que c'est seulement en fin de semaine que vous avez arrêté, que le système a été suspendu?
Alors, je donnerai ma parole à ma collègue, mais je dirais que c'est important de comprendre qu'il y a deux systèmes impliqués. Il y a le système MyGCK et les systèmes de CRA. Alors, les événements et les mitigations étaient sur des échéanciers différents pour ces deux systèmes. So, if you want to talk about the CRA events.
Oui. Avec la vulnérabilité, nous avons déterminé un problème potentiel le 7 août. Et après ça, nous avons déterminé, oui, c'est vraiment une vulnérabilité et nous avons pris les actions pour résoudre le problème. Après ça, j'ai décidé de contacter le GRC parce qu'il y a un potentiel de fraude. Puis, nous avons fait des changements système, nous avons ajouté des contrôles de sécurité. Et nous avons, et nous étions très confidents que le contrôle était bien. Mais après le changement de GCK, nous avons remarqué l'action d'une attaque le samedi, le 16 ou le 15 août, et nous avons décidé de bloquer et
fermer nos portails parce que il y a beaucoup d'activités.
Because there was a great deal of activity.
300,000
about 300,000
attaques
attempted
de nos
attacks
systèmes.
on our system.
Je m'excuse. Nous ne sommes pas certaines que le système était protégé et nous sommes très intéressés en la sécurité des données des Canadiens et nous avons décidé de fermer les portails.
Data security is of great concern to us, so we decided to close
des
down
questions
our portal.
pratico-pratiques. Quand vous dites 9000 comptes, est-ce que ça comprend les 5600? C'est 9000 plus 5600. Et attendez, ça sera plus mon tour. Et puis à la question précédente de QMI, à madame, elle demandait si les paiements pour la PCU ou la PCUE vont être retardés à cause de ce problème, et à ça, vous n'avez pas vraiment répondu.
And you didn't really answer that question.
Nous avons des contrôles pour vérifier les paiements
in order to verify
les bénéfices, mais je pense qu'il n'y aura pas un grand délai de paiement. C'est juste pour vérifier que la personne qui a demandé un paiement est vraiment la personne qui a besoin de ce paiement.
Et sur les 9000, c'est 9000 plus 5600?
Alors, c'est un peu compliqué parce qu'il y a les deux systèmes. Il y a 9000 comptes sur le GCK qui ont été affectés. CRA ont mentionné 5500. De ce chiffre-là, 3300 étaient de provenance du GCK. Alors, en total, ça fait 11,200.
over GCK. So in total, it's 11,200 accounts.
Hi. In all that you said, I'm not hearing an apology. I understand that Canadians have to take some responsibility for the type of passwords that they're using, but there was a flaw that you had to fix on your system. And so I want to use that as a launching pad to ask you two things. Are you going to be offering any assistance to Canadians whose accounts were compromised and are freaking out that they're going to be victims of identity fraud? And then just finally, are there any other ways that they're vulnerable in this point in time? Should they be worried about other services, whether it be government, whether it be businesses, whether it be whatever, that they should be reviewing right now? If you want to offer any advice, are you going to offer any assistance, and are you going to offer apology?
So I would say that those citizens that are worried about identity, they already are, or they already have been victims. The credentials were stolen at some point in the past, and these attackers are reusing them. It's not a matter of being sorry or not sorry. Of course, this is not something we want to happen, but we are reacting to those attackers and addressing them and mitigating those services as much as possible. And that does include supporting Canadians, and I'll turn to Annette and maybe also Lori if she wants to talk about ESDC. There is a large measure of how do we support the users and how do we support them in getting back online and getting their services. To the advice side, it's what we said. If you've been a victim here, there's a good chance you are a victim elsewhere as well. Check your bank accounts, check your social media, check your e-commerce systems, because the attackers will use those wherever they can, and they have quite sophisticated systems. We believe that the large amount of this is sort of, I don't want to say normal course, but it is something that happens on a fairly frequent basis, and it's because we have the tools capable of detecting that we were able to address them.
So from a CRA point of view, if we have identified through our analysis of all of these accounts that there has been identity theft or fraud, CRA will provide assistance through our public affairs branch, our chief privacy officer. We'll offer credit protection if that's necessary and take all assurances to ensure the account is made whole.
So no apology. I want to ask you, you said that these are bad actors. Are they based domestically? Are they foreign? Are you still looking into that? Are you ruling that out? Can you speak to that?
That's a matter of the current investigation, so we can't speak to that.
So you're not ruling it out? It's something you're looking into?
Of course. The RCMP will be looking at the source. Is that your question?
Yeah, whether it's a foreign or domestic source.
Absolutely. The source of the bad actors, yes, they're going to try to determine if they can find out where they're coming from, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'll take another question from the room.
Yes, good morning. Thank you so much for being here and taking our questions. Noah Richardson from CTV National News. You've talked about how these were bad actors entering in through the front door with information that had already been stolen. So when we have a record number of Canadians using your online platforms to apply for things like the wage subsidy, for CERB, for EI, for other government programs that have been unveiled during the pandemic, why weren't proactive steps taken before this happened to ensure that this didn't happen? We already knew that this information had been stolen, had been obtained in other breaches. So why wasn't the government doing anything proactively to prevent this from happening?
So, as I said earlier, we are always looking at ways of mitigating risk. There's always a threat assessment on the horizon. CRA had the secondary security question in place. There was other things that we are doing. So we are always doing things to make sure we're protecting our systems. We'll evaluate this threat and make adjustments as necessary if we feel that we have to.
And as a follow-up, various tech giants over the last number of months have been announcing plans that they are putting in place this fall to protect security. I know Apple is implementing a system that will essentially tell users when they're signing up for an online platform if their password has been used before in another place. So I'm just wondering what the government of Canada is considering in terms of proactively improving its software, its online platforms, so that when new users or existing users are modifying their accounts, they may get notifications that say, hey, this password has already been used before, or you're using this password somewhere else.
So we always look at new technology as it comes out. As I mentioned earlier, we have to really make sure that no Canadian is left behind. So when we apply technology or when we take advantage of technology, we have to make sure we're not going to disconnect any subset. So for example, if it's something that only works on newer technology, how do we support people that are on older technology? So often what that means is we have a multi-tiered approach and we look at taking advantage of those technologies where possible.
And this isn't a follow-up, but I'm just wondering if you could please repeat in English the specific breakdown, just because I think there is still a bit of confusion. So if you could just, in English, repeat the breakdown between the number of accounts from CRA versus the Government of Canada and the total number.
All right, so 9,041 was the MyGC key impacted accounts. And that was across those 30 departments. CRA had 5,500 thereabouts, of which we believe 3,300 was the source was the MyGC key. So that puts a total at 11,200 because of that overlap.
Thank you.
Before we go to the next question, I'll just turn it over to Laurie, who wanted to add something.
Thanks very much. Laurie McDonald, Senior Associate Deputy Minister, ESDC, and Chief Operating Officer for Service Canada. I just wanted to reflect on a couple of previous questions, and just to start off by saying that certainly we apologize for any inconvenience on behalf of the Government of Canada that caused to any of our clients, whether that's in CRA or ESDC or Service Canada, in terms of what's happened here over the past several days in terms of the attack. I also want to reiterate that both CRA and ourselves took immediate action to stop this attack, working with our partners in order to ensure that, in fact, people's information and accounts were not compromised. So as an example, we immediately worked with our third-party provider to put a solution in place within a matter of hours. We monitored all of our online services beyond the ones that were compromised, but in fact all of our services within our departments to ensure that there were no additional impacts in terms of that. We had our third-party provider disable the accounts that were in fact compromised, and then within the department, we also disabled those accounts. We then immediately set up a communication plan with our clients. So as an example, we sent emails to every EI client that was compromised in terms of their account to notify them. We set up a special 1-800 number for people to call us immediately. We kept our call centers open this weekend and in the evenings to ensure people had access to us, also that we could get our clients back online with their accounts authenticated so that they could actually continue with their business. So we continue to work closely with our cybersecurity colleagues, with our Treasury Board colleagues and our CRA colleagues to ensure that people can access services that they need.
Thanks, Lori. So we'll go back to the phone line if there are any other questions, moderator.
Thank you. Merci. Once again, please press *1 at this time if you have a question. De nouveau, n'hésitez pas à appuyer sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. There will be a brief pause while participants register for questions. Il y aura un court délai vous permettant de vous enregistrer dans la file d'attente pour les questions. And we do have a question from Howard Solomon from IT World Canada. Please go ahead.
My question is, do these attacks not demonstrate that there was a total failure of the systems that the government had set up to protect the accounts of Canadians?
So I would argue no, quite the opposite. The system worked. We were able to identify these fraudulent transactions coming in through some pretty sophisticated analytics against the systems that detected behaviors. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, this is still from a pure system perspective, a user logging into the system, or at least trying to log into the system, and our tools were able to detect those patterns that were suspicious and identify that they were in fact not valid, and that's when we took those measures, as Lori described. It's important to know that when we're looking at these systems and making sure that we're watching them, we're not affecting users who are actually valid users at the same time. So it is always a very complicated exercise to analyze that traffic and make sure we're detecting true malicious intent versus just people forgetting their passwords. So I would argue that system worked, and then once that those accounts were identified as being potentially compromised, that's when the system sort of jumped into action and did all the things that we talked about. Disabled accounts, implemented measures, contacted the RCMP, the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, as well as communicating back to the users and to Canadians as a whole.
Yeah, but you detected, but there were thousands of accounts compromised.
So not to minimize it, but 9,000 or 11,000 out of 12 million. This was still a pretty sophisticated capacity to identify those accounts. We have thousands of transactions every day on these systems, so it is a high volume system.
Okay. Prochaine question.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from Murad Hamadi from The Logic. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi. Murad Hamadi at The Logic. So you detected that you had this problem. You've suspended online services. You've talked about restoring them on Wednesday. If sort of the vector of this attack is on the login end, what difference does it make to suspend accounts? Can't they just restart this on Wednesday?
So I'll let Annette talk about the CRA, but the services for the MyGC, which has already been implemented and was not suspended, has implemented a tool called a CAPTCHA, which is the capability to identify that someone is actually a human and not a robot that is trying to access the service. I'm getting that don't call it CAPTCHA, so sorry, don't quote me on the CAPTCHA piece, but it is similar technology to that, where you may see that when you try to log in, you're presented with a picture or text or sound, something that is easy for a human to understand, but not a robot. So that's the type of technology we're implementing. Annette, do you want to talk about the restoration for CRA?
Right. So we are also implementing additional controls, and we expect to have those in place by Wednesday. Once those controls are in place, we believe that the services will be secured, and we will be restoring the My Account and Represent a Client service. Thank you.
Okay. Prochaine question sur la ligne. Next question.
Thank you. La prochaine question est de Jacques-Audrey Charbonneau de Radio-Canada. À vous la parole.
Radio-Canada, please go ahead.
Oui, bonjour. D'abord, juste une précision. Tout à l'heure, je crois que Madame a mentionné que pour My Business et pour les demandes de subventions salariales, c'était déjà rétabli. Est-ce que c'est bien le cas?
That service has already been reestablished online. Is that
correct? Parfait.
Answer, yes, that's right.
Également, pour ce qui est il y a beaucoup d'experts qui disent que pour ce qui est des comptes qui ont été compromis au niveau de l'Agence du revenu du Canada, c'est très clair qu'il y a une volonté de vol d'identité et par la suite de réclamer la PCU. Est-ce que vous avez déjà une idée de l'impact ou à quel point il y a eu des demandes frauduleuses de la PCU, puis à quel point justement le contrôle entre les demandes fausses et les demandes des gens qui sont réellement dans le besoin ont eu un impact là, actuellement.
Nous sommes en train d'établir un processus de vérifier les demandes pour s'assurer que les personnes qui ont fait une application est la vraie personne. Nous avons beaucoup de contrôles dans notre processus de l'agence et aussi dans les contrôles sécuritaires dans nos infrastructures. Et je suis confiante avec les changements. Nous sommes prêts de commencer avec les services mercredi cette semaine.
Mais est-ce que vous avez noté une augmentation des fraudes? Parce qu'on sait qu'il y en a eu quand même pas mal des fraudes liées à la PCU.
Fraud, because there were fraudulent applications of CERB, for example.
Excusez-moi, c'est Maxime Guénette de l'Agence du revenu. Juste pour dire, on est toujours en train de faire l'analyse de ces transactions-là. Donc, à l'heure actuelle, on n'a pas des chiffres officiels à fournir par rapport au montant financier qui aurait pu être déboursé à des fraudeurs. L'analyse est toujours en cours du genre de transactions qui auraient pu avoir lieu sur des comptes qui ont potentiellement été affectés par les incidents cette semaine.
Merci. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. Are there any other questions on the line before we turn back to the room?
There are no further questions on the telephone lines.
All right, so last question here for la presse canadienne.
Oui, merci. Je voudrais savoir comment est-ce que les gens sont avertis, ces 11 000, parce que là, quelqu'un a parlé de courriels envoyés. Ils savent comment ces gens-là que leur compte.
So how will Canadians know that their account was affected?
Envoyer une lettre. Cette semaine.
A letter will be sent out this week.
Oui, non, ça, j'avais déjà entendu ça en fin de semaine, mais là, j'ai entendu qu'il y a un courriel qui est envoyé pour certaines de ces 11 000 personnes.
C'est différent pour les différents systèmes. Laura, do you want to talk about what you guys have done?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question.
For ESDC, we've actually have email addresses for the vast majority of clients. So we have emailed them. We also have a call-out service in place to call people to contact them. We set up a special 1-800 call center number, and we will also be sending letters. So we have multiple ways of contacting clients and have commenced that immediately starting last Friday.
Tandis que les gens de l'Agence du revenu du Canada, c'est seulement par la poste.
Whereas for people at CRA, it's just that will only be advised through the mail system.
Thank you, everyone.
Right?
This will conclude today's technical briefing. Any additional questions can be directed to the Treasury Board Secretariat or to one of the organizations represented today. La séance est maintenant terminée. On vous remercie de votre participation. Si vous avez d'autres questions, n'hésitez pas à communiquer avec le Bureau des relations avec les médias, le secrétariat du Conseil du Trésor ou avec une des organisations représentées aujourd'hui. Alors, merci. Bonne journée.
Thank you and a good day to all.
Besoin des noms de tout le monde parce que c'était difficile à saisir. Alors, Marc, brouillard, comme du brouillard.
Probably a Libra. Yeah. Not a Virgo.
Are you going into the office or are you going to...
I'm going to